Okay, we'll get going. Okay, we'll get going. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Once again, my apologies for the length of the meeting just before this. It went a little bit late, so we're ready to go. I want to begin with a quick comment about something that I think all of Council is proud of, and the city is quite proud of as well. We have a really dedicated group at Coquitlam Fire and Rescue, and one of the things they're pretty dedicated about is forestry interface fires and the training involved in that, and as well as the equipment involved in that. And we recently accepted a deployment from the province, paid for by the province, of one of our crews that was sent up north, and I wanted to hand the microphone over to Fire Chief Pearlett, perhaps who can explain a little bit about the kinds of work that was done here. We've got some photos up for you, and Chief Pearlett.
Through the chair, Your Worship, absolutely right, and tremendously proud of our structural protection unit that we have within Coquitlam Fire Rescue. We actually have 2 units, and the province requested last week, or 2 weeks ago, August 16th, for deployment, cost recovery, and we sent our team up with our equipment and special trailer and vehicles. And we went 5.5 hours northwest of Mackenzie to a forestry camp there, where they were helicoptered into remote sites such as you're seeing here every day, sometimes as far as 170 kilometers distance. It was a 5-person team we sent up, a chief officer and 4 specialists, and whose primary duty is to set up sprinklers on structures or infrastructure in remote areas that have no fire protection available. And this is, they do this inside of the fire that's coming, so it's risky work. They have to get in and get the sprinkler set up, and they pre-sprinkler and pre-wet these areas, and then they follow up returning on a daily basis to put more fuel in the pumps and things that they're getting their water supply from. And they are remote areas. There are fishing lodges, hunting lodges. There are some logging camps, mining infrastructure, First Nation infrastructure such as roadways and bridges, and some of their structures as well. And from there, they maintain these structures daily, and they did that for 2 weeks, living out of forestry camps in their tents. And they were returned home safely last week, August 30th, where I met them. And their equipment, however, was taken over by a second team that forestry used, and our equipment has just been demobilized, and we'll be picking it up later this week from Kamloops. They've managed to bring it back as far as Kamloops. So it's been a very good deployment, and I've heard from the rural community there that they're tremendously grateful for the provision of this. For them, this is their economic livelihoods. This is what they depend on, and they have no fire insurance in these areas, and they were able to save all of these properties. And this is one that shows you how close it comes, and what a good job the sprinkler protection does. So tremendously proud of them. I like how this works. They bring back a lot of skills and knowledge to our own community. We can do the same work here, and while they're deployed, we do retain a second team for the protection of Coquitlam, so that we're not left without the capability here. And one of the things I've learned as a fire chief here is we are the first career department in the International Association of Firefighters in British Columbia to have this team trained and certified, and we were the first team to deploy several years ago. Of special interest, I won't take too much longer, is that the team reported to their commander up there was the ex-fire chief Tony Delmonico, who is a sprinkler protection specialist, and he was running the team. And of even greater notice, to some degree, is that Tony was reporting to an ex-assistant fire chief from Coquitlam by the name of Pat McPhillips, who started the program, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago. So basically, Coquitlam kind of saved the North. So thank you very much.
Well, there you go. They've asked for us by name and by reputation. That certainly is great that the force is as well trained as they are to serve our needs, and as well practiced as they are by going up and applying this technology and this training in forest fire areas. Much appreciated. Thank you. Please pass on our council's regards to the team and our appreciation. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item on this evening's agenda is the minutes of the public hearing held Monday, July 28th. The recommendation to approve.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 is the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, July 28th, and I would also say parts of July 29th, and the recommendation is to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is an item that was originally deferred from the July 28th meeting, and it concerns a recommendation from the Maillardville Commercial and Cultural Revitalization Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, June 19th. This concerns the Maillardville specific banners, which is a priority B in that committee's work. The committee recommendation is that council direct staff to report back regarding the use of neighborhood-specific banners in Maillardville, and 2, the council directs staff to report back separately on expanding the banner program to include neighborhood-specific banners in other parts of the city.
Second.
Now it's moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Banner year. No.
Item 4 is minutes of the Sports Council meeting held on Tuesday, June 24th. The recommendation is that these minutes be received.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is minutes of the Multiculturalism Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, July 16th. Recommendation to receive.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor O'Neill. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, I'm just going to take the opportunity just to quickly address one of the major things in the minutes here. I wasn't at the meeting. I was really pleased to see this detailed notes about the discussion with Alden Habakon. I think this discussion touches on an issue I've raised a couple of times in the last few months, and it's trying to move to a new model of multiculturalism that starts looking at the things that unite us rather than the ways that we are different. And so I think his sort of model of talking about interculturalism starts moving in that direction, and it's a good discussion to have. So it's, I'm glad to see it happening.
Very good. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 concerns minutes of the Coquitlam 125th Anniversary Steering Task Force meeting held on Wednesday, July 23rd. The recommendation is to receive those minutes.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is our first report of staff, and it concerns the zoning bylaw text amendment, Bylaw 4502. This is to amend the RS7 through RS11 one-family residential zones. The staff recommendation is that Council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment Bylaw number 4502, that Bylaw 4502 be referred to public hearing, and that Bylaw 4502 be referred to the Urban Development Institute and the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association, along with a copy of the report.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. The stated purpose of these text amendments is to take into account and to adjust to the different slopes there and the difficulty with the lots and everything. However, there is, I think, item number 2 specifically, I don't think actually really deals with that. It's a different bookkeeping thing, dealing, not bookkeeping, but fixing what's perhaps seen as a loophole or something, dealing with how far forward the garages should be in relation to the front of the house and things like that. And that's an issue that can exist anywhere, I think, and it's not necessarily specific to this area, or is it? Because I didn't really get that, and maybe the general manager can shed some light on that, open the door, as it were, to more information.
Mr. McIntyre.
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess to carry on the pun, that goes sort of part and parcel with it. No, they are interrelated because there's a number of factors at play here. And maybe I can just sort of step back and talk about the original intent of some of these single-family zones in the Northeast. And the zoning regulations we kind of had prepared and got ourselves working with, and some of the difficulties we're facing that because they do work together. In the Northeast, Northeast Coquitlam, there were separate and unique single-family residential zones that were prepared. And this came out of the Northeast Coquitlam area plan, some of the earlier neighborhood plans. There was this desire, this intention to create these new residential neighborhoods. So there was a whole suite of single-family zones that went with that. Somewhat idealistic stuff. One of those aspirations or objectives was to have the houses, what we call addressing the street. And that is to have the house closer to the street so that observation, eyes on the street, and that sort of thing, but also to sort of downplay and reduce the impact, the visual impact of garage doors, double garage doors. And so a number of these zones had requirements that would specify a maximum amount of, or a minimum amount of what could be the front elevation minus the garage door, so a maximum amount of garage. And it also specified areas from the setback, the front yard setback, that the building could be located. It was basically in a zone from the front setback line. And in that, I think it was well-intentioned, and it seemed to work okay with some of the earlier lots where the lots were more regular, i.e. rectangular. There was always some reluctance from some of the builders about it, but it was made to work. As we got into other situations where the lots are less regular, some of the curvilinear streets along some of the cul-de-sacs, particularly when the sites start getting a little steeper, it gets difficult to sort of compel the house to put that whole envelope into a certain zone at a certain setback distance from the front property line and still have the garage door behind the main part of the house. So we've been working at this for a while with some of the builders and the designers, and we thought, let's go back and revisit these regulations in these various zones, the RS7, RS8, RS9, RS10, 11, and let's just clean this up. Let's do away with trying to compel the whole building envelope within a certain zone, because we trust that the design of buildings these days, single-family residents, they'll be as close to the front property line as they can be. There's a minimum setback distance. The builder wants to optimize the rear yard area, so we don't think it's necessary for the zoning bylaw to specify a setback area. However, we do think it's still important to call for a minimum amount of front building face, i.e. sort of minimize the garage door width, but also have the building face out in front of the garage door. So the garage door is at least a meter behind the front of the rest of the building. And that can also include the front porch and steps to the building can be out front.
Okay, but the theme of the rest of the bylaws seemed to be okay, well, especially about the minimum setback for the whole home from the front seemed to be okay. It's just happening anyway, so so we don't need to be as prescriptive there. But here, there's a definite introduction of a prescription here that regardless of what your lot looks like here, when you're in this zone, as with all the other zones, your garage door is going to have to be a meter back from where your front door is. And I'm just wondering if that's actually going to add a layer of complexity, where in the rest of this you seem to be wanting to make it more flexible and not complexable. So this is why I'm asking questions about it. And there's a lot of good designs where the garage is forward. And I did a printout here, say about 7 of these 8 garage forward designs look pretty attractive, and most people wouldn't mind them. And they do encompass eyes on the street and all of that stuff. There's a few of them, of course, that really aren't that nice. So I'm glad this is going to the builders and the UDI and everything for their comment. I'd like to see that. And I don't know if you have any more comments. I just sort of made a general statement. I want this to go forward for sure, and I'm glad there's going to be some input from the builders.
And that's why we made that recommendation. We have been working with a number of the developers and the builders and some of their designers that are UDI and GVHBA members, but we want to make sure those organizations received it formally. I guess if a final response would be, we're trying to we're hoping to still achieve sort of the main thrust of the bylaw. That was to have the buildings close to the street, downplay the visual impact of the garage, but do it in a reasonable way, but provide greater flexibility than what we had before. Because before, the regulations were, I think, overly complex, and so now we're just being much more upfront and straight about it, that, you know, the garage is supposed to be 1 meter back at minimum, and those minimum widths still have to remain.
And there could still be, in the future, where it's just not practical for that, there could still be allowable alterations to that, and those things come forward all the time, given the...
They can, yes. To the chair, there's always the development variance permit process avenue, but we tried to minimize on that, because otherwise you'd have a lot of those applications coming forward, and it's kind of flying in the face of the zoning bylaw. So you want to make the zoning bylaw, you know, realistic and practical.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, mine's sort of along the same line, but you know how on the island, on Vancouver Island, they use a lot of the CD zones, like especially for commercial retail strips, malls and stuff like that. And it's sort of a zone, I've always liked it, lots of people hate it, but I've always liked it because developers can go in with some very unique ideas that wouldn't really fit into any of these bylaws, right? And you can come out with some really entertaining developments that are really fun. They're fun to be around. They're fun to live in. So I guess when I read through this, and I get where you're going, I mean, every time someone brings in another application, they have to go through this huge set of drawings and rules and regulations. So there's a lot of folks up on Burke Mountain that are concerned that the houses are too close to the front property line, and I think we need to address that and talk about that, and that may be in certain locations. So there we go. Now we may have all of these prescriptive rules, but maybe we're not taking into consideration certain locations with these zones. Then I'm getting a little, frankly, tired of when we get some of the small lots where they're 30 feet or something like that, and they've got 15 or 16 houses, and then they want to squeeze every drop, so we get one funny, goofy little shaped lot in there that's straddling a puddle, and, you know, where everybody spends weeks trying to get it to fit on a lot because it's just lot value at that time. I'm to the point now where I don't want to play with those anymore. They can take that 20 feet or 26 feet or whatever, and they can incorporate it into the other lots and add on a couple of grand and get their money back anyhow. So I think I'm really concerned with dealing with that. So why I'm bringing all this up, I want to create a bit more fairness. I think the neighborhoods up there are getting a lot of them to look alike. And you know, I want the wow factor, and it's sort of disappearing. We're not seeing a lot of wow with the factor. And I'm wondering if I don't even know what you'd call it because I'm not a planner. If you had a zone that was like a CD zone, that it would say it was RS, what we would like in the city is RS 10, whatever, which would give them what size property they could probably build. And then let them come in and show us what they could do without having all these prescriptive rules. Just ask them.
Your Worship, the CD, or Comprehensive Development Zone, it is a different approach. We have used that on occasion, rare occasion here in Coquitlam.
Oh, I know.
Because there's another school of thought around CD zones, but and maybe as we get further up the hill and further to the east, where the sites do become very, very challenging, you've got narrow fingers of land, developable land between watercourses that are quite steep. That might just call for that sort of, hey, we need to start with a blank sheet and do the zoning alone. Some of the other single-family housing, I guess beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
So you feel you have to be prescriptive? That's
well, there are some pluses too. I think we want to provide that flexibility, but when you have a design community that's familiar with the City of Coquitlam zoning bylaws, and the bylaw requirements for the single-family zones are clear up front. They understand it. It makes for a lot less uncertainty and disagreement. The applications come into our building staff, and they review the plans, and again, the rules are pretty straightforward. The designer's got it. They can check it. It's easier for the contractor to spec and quote and all that and build. So there is some inherent advantages in having...
Well, there is if you want same old, same old, same old.
And this is where, yeah, you need to rely on the designers and the developers to dress them up a bit so they don't have that sameness about them. And I think up there, and I drive around up there a couple times a month just to check and see how things are coming together. Some subdivisions, some neighborhoods have been more successful than others, certainly. The single family, I think by their very nature, they tend to look more the same. I think we're getting more uniqueness with some of the townhouse projects. Actually, I'm quite pleased with some of the townhouse, the variation in that. But the single family, by its nature, does tend to start looking the same because you're working from the same box of zoning regulations. Coming back to the CD zone is something that we will keep in mind. I'll relay that back to the staff as we go up the hill. And we got developers that are looking at some of these more challenging sites, and so that could be an option.
Well, I hope so, because the more I see and the more the sites get more challenging, as you say, I think there's got to be other ways of doing things than what we're doing. So that's it. So I guess I'll pass this and have to be happy with it. No wow factor for now. Thank
Try to
you.
get wow factor out of this one. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have to admit I find these issues really difficult to get my head around. I read the paragraphs and then I go back and read them again, and I imagine a lot in my mind and think 2 meters back and then another meter here and another, some graphics, some little doodles, and here's a lot. And the gray zone is the front of the house has to be within that box, or I suspect that if it would be helpful to me, there are members of the public that it would be helpful to as well. And maybe we could even get it by the time we get to public hearing. So my first comment, I have 3, and they're quite distantly related from each other. I hear what Councillor Reid says about that last lot in the end of the subdivision being 26 feet long and a kind of a funny shape, and guaranteed you're going to get a DVP. We're going to have to do this, and we're going to have to do that, and what I scribbled down here is not just about that, but about this whole business of we're having to make these changes because Burke Mountain, we're realizing that Burke Mountain is steep and that a grid street pattern won't work, and streets have to follow the curves and all that kind of stuff. And so the lots are funny looking, which gives them lots of opportunity to be wow, right? Because they're not the same from left to right. But perhaps the solution is not so much in changing our standards to accommodate the lots as designing a subdivision that will accommodate the standards. And perhaps that means a lesser lot yield. And it means thinking about it earlier in the process so that we get the best properties, the best community that we can, that meets the standards that we some years ago said we want to meet in Burke Mountain: walkability, sustainability, all those great things. So that's something that I would like us to be thinking about. The last one applies sort of generically to whenever these things come along. We have, I'm sure you got a function key on the computer that says referred to the Urban Development Institute and the Greater Vancouver Home Builders Association along with a copy of the staff report. And my initial thought was, gee, those are big grown-up organizations, and they have staff who pay attention to what we're doing. I'm sure they do, and they must know what's going on in Coquitlam because it's important to them. But I guess it's nice of us to send it to them, and we're trying to be open and all that kind of stuff. But it kind of begs the question, who else should we be treating this way? In this particular instance, I don't think there's any doubt that we should send this to the Northeast Coquitlam ratepayers. And we should probably send it to the various people who've been sending us letters talking about short front yards, too close to the street, not eyes on the street, but so close that you're going to close the blinds and go to the backyard. There are a bunch of other people who we should have reason to believe are just as interested in what we're doing here as the people that we've identified in this report. I'm not going to try and amend the motion to include Janet Klopp or Northeast Coquitlam ratepayers, but I'd like staff to say that they will think about that and attempt to make sure that people that we have reason to believe should be interested are aware. And that's everything I have to say. Thank you.
There you go.
Your Worship, if I could, some points there, and it's been raised by other council members, so maybe if I don't mind. The drawings, yes, and I struggle with this myself. I had to sit down with the author of this report. We walked through it again this morning, and I turned to her and I said, Kim, you know, we really need some drawings here. And she said, oh, yeah, okay. I said, well, so let's get that teed up for the public hearing. Because the basic concept, I think the initial zoning was maybe a little overly elegant and elaborate. It had good intentions, but it was overly elegant. What we're trying to do is not lose those objectives, but make it more clear-cut. So that's the basic bottom line here, but there's a way of illustrating that. The last lot, the leftovers, and my colleague Raul can attest to this too. This is one of the greatest challenges in subdivision design, because there's a incredible drive to maximize the lot yield. And so we look at the proposed design, the concept through the process, and one of the tests that we do, and aside from good road access and privacy and layout, is we need to be assured, and we will do the checks ourselves, that these lots we're creating are not problem orphan lots. We need to see that there's a decent, reasonable building envelope. So it gets into a little bit of tug of war around just what is the last lot and how buildable this is, but that's part of the the ongoing dynamic of the market up there. But we do watch for that. We don't want to be creating a lot that down the way in a couple of months' time is going to be causing problems for our colleagues just down the counter in the building permits division. So we're aware of that. Yeah, the referral, this is purposeful because we had a lot of dialogue with the UDI members and their designers. We were trying to get this thing forward to move this on, and rather than doing the informal review, we wanted to formally get it out to them so they're aware of that. But certainly we can take that as direction. I'll discuss it with Jay, the City Clerk's Department, around the circulation public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Rasmussen.
Thank you very much. Through to Mr. McIntyre. As I read through the report, what I was looking at, and it was, I think you alluded to it, some of these changes are creating more flexibility that creates more design abilities in the properties of housing to make it look a bit better than what we're having due to the regulation. I know we did a number of years ago, it was a lot more prescriptive. We eased up and we got some more creative designs, a little more wow rather than the cookie cutter. So is this just an extension of, once again, allowing a little more flexibility for the developers on how they design the look of the houses?
Through the chair, yes, essentially, particularly on those lots where you have a curvilinear front, like on a cul-de-sac bulb, and you have a slope to contend with. It can be very challenging for the designer to put anything that looks half decent on that meets bylaw requirements and has reasonable driveway and pedestrian access to the unit. So it's pretty necessary.
And the other part that I'd like to see here, something I brought up to you a few years ago, is about the 85% rule and the clarification in that we haven't been getting what we expected to, where we're getting decks off the back and just straight walls off the back. And so to articulate and create more design in the upper stories rather than just a square box, the change in the text here clarifies this better than what we had before, because we weren't able to due to the terminology in that. So that's going to create, once again, a better design look and change on the development of the buildings up there, less of a box look going straight up. And I guess one other issue I have up there, and I mentioned this to Mr. McIntyre, and it's not directly part of the report, but it's a concern in the Northeast and comes down to parking. And some of the newer roads up in the Sheffield, different areas, I pushed for a number of years to make the change, I think, well, along with Mayor Stewart, to change the standards from 8 meters to 8.5 meters to allow for parking on both sides of the roads. We have new roads that have been put in the last year and a half. I was up there again, and I'm noticing no parking on one side of the street, and I'm going, why are we doing this? So I don't think we have to allow on local roads at 8.5 meters that parking on both sides of the street, because I think we're just creating it. If we keep doing this, and we've done it already on some newer lots after we made the 8.5 meters, so just to staff that we shouldn't be allowing these 8-meter parking on one side of the street on any more roads up there as we develop further out. Thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak. I'm going to echo the last comments. At 8.5, it doesn't seem like much, but it makes all the difference to being able to actually make the road function. And so I'll agree with that. And I know Councillor Reid, who's pretty passionate about parking, and she's pretty passionate about parking, pets, and many other P words. Stop.
You better stop while you're there.
So I'll echo the comments. Seeing nobody else, the motion is first reading and a public hearing and referral to some organizations. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
The next item, item 8, concerns the 2014 Water Conservation Program review. Staff recommendations that Council direct staff to develop a strategy to prioritize and implement the recommendations contained in this review.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. And supporting the recommendation. I just wanted to get a little share experience I had this summer when in July, I think most of you know that my wife and I spent 2 weeks in India working in a little village, and there the water use is very limited. One statistic I have says that an average person uses 47 cubic meters of water a year, personal use there, compared to in Canada, 277 cubic meters. And I think during the discussion we were having in India, part of the discussion turned on, well, we have to look at ways of cutting our water usage back. And I said, yes, conservation is important, but we should always keep in mind that there's a very strong correlation between freshwater usage and your overall standard of living and quality of life and GDP. And so really what we should be looking at is finding ways to help the people in the little village in India increase their freshwater usage, as well as, you know, certainly we conserve and we don't waste here. But I don't think we should feel terribly guilty about the fact that we use 10 or 20 times as much fresh water as a village in India. I think it's a sign that our society is working pretty well, and I think this report helps us keep on track, so we use our resource wisely. That's just something I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
I don't know what to say about that.
You don't have to respond.
You pushed your button.
Yeah, no, I got a question. It threw me off. The non-revenue accounted for between 13 and 23% of total demand in 2013. So up to 23% of our water is being used to flush the drains for fire hydrant use and leaks. And I just thought, wow, that seems pretty high. It seems like a lot of water. Is there something that we can do to try to minimize that without, you know, compromising safety and that sort of thing? But is that pretty standard for most municipalities?
Anybody? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Through your worship, the percentage indicated in the report is not unusual in the Lower Mainland area. Depending on the pipe materials and the age of the pipe, there are leakages, and obviously because the pipes are underground, they are at times very difficult to locate. What we can do, and we do actually, is have certain water audits where for a certain area that can be relatively easily isolated from the rest of the system, we calculate based on the average known water consumption how much the water consumption should be, we measure the actual water consumption in that area, and if the measured water consumption is substantially greater than what it really should be, then we start narrowing down this area and search for the leak. Typically, the easiest form and the most common form of the water leakage comes at the service connections, but it's not uncommon to see also water main breaks. And with this method, before anything would show on the surface, we could find this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, nobody else? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next item, item 9, concerns the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief for its meeting of July 25th. Our Metro Vancouver representatives are here to respond to questions and the staff recommendations that Council receive the brief for information.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Anybody? Oops, sorry, Councillor. You know, you guys have to change your voices or something. One of you could speak a little. Okay, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Your Worship, that's the last formal item on this agenda.
Okay.
I have one item.
You have to push your button.
I have one item.
Councillor Sikora, you have an item?
Thank you. The fact is that, there's been a lot of discussion about Coquitlam Lake and Mariner are now truck routes, the furthest of the truth. And then it goes on, council narrowly approved the truck route. It was 6-3 was the vote in favor of a truck being used temporarily. Then it says in September they possibly a permanently truck route. Far from the truth. Number one, this is on a trial basis and nothing more, nothing less. But here's a candidate that is putting out this garbage literature that's misleading, to say the least. And apparently you, Mayor, were waltzing her up and down Mariner Street and while she was passing these things out. Now, I don't know whether that's a fact or not, whether she's passing these things out or not, but I know that friends of mine on Mariner Street were phoning me saying the mayor is here with a candidate that wants to be council member. And to me, I think two things bother me is, I know many mayors, including when I was the mayor, I never waltzed any candidates that wanted to be a council member. Did a council member come with me? Maybe yes. But a candidate? I don't think so. What's so special about this Terry, whatever her name is, that the mayor has to be with her at all times, taking her up and down the street and introducing her to people, the fact is, Mayor, that you even in the paper, you quoted the fact is that, quite often Sikora is the only one that votes against anything. There's 8 for and 1 against. Well, if you're so happy with all the council members, why are you trying to bring somebody from the outside to be a council member? And Councillor Wilson has got something that you sent out on Facebook this morning that's very distasteful. Also misleading, things that are not true. So, I'm really, really concerned. I know it's a silly season. It's election time. The people that are going to elect the mayor, the people that are going to elect the council members, it won't be you, Mayor. It won't be me. It'll be the taxpayers of this community and the voters of this community will elect the future council members. And to me, it doesn't matter who it is. As long as, everything is honest and there's no fictitious figures there or some trying to frighten the public of how to vote or how not to vote. Here's these animals are going to put this truck route forever and a day. Well, does Centennial School have to be built? Of course. Does the SkyTrain have to be built? Of course. By whose homes are they going to go if they don't go up Mariner? Now, this is on a trial basis. It's coming back to us. Matter of fact, the deadline is today. It should have been come back to us now or in a week's time because we said it's only till September 15th.
No, we said it was till September 30th.
September 30th. We're going to be talking about it. And again,
it's renewable.
On a report that I get, is going to make, I'm going to make my decisions. Am I going to extend it for another 2 or 3 months or not? And I may do so. All depends what the report says. There's certainly, you know, they're talking about a high speed. Well, there's high speed there because of traffic. The cars are roaring up and down there. And it's a traffic enforcement by the RCMP. What have we got? 15 years ago, we had 15 RCMP, and traffic now we have only 18. We've grown by 3 only. The population has grown by 15,000. So, you know, the things go on and on and on. But I don't know what about this Terry Tonner, what's so special that the mayor takes her under his wings and waltzes her up and down Mariner Way and other places for her to spread this awful untrue stories. Frankly, I'm sure that every council member who voted for it will say the same thing. It's on a trial basis. Am I going to commit today that no, it will go no further?
The flyer apparently says that too.
I can't say that. When the report comes forward, when the vote comes in, I'll probably vote. And then again, the fact is, the story there, Socorro started this. Well, I didn't. I was one of the people that voted for it. If you look at the record, I had nothing to do with the starting of it. You know, I was in favor of it, of course I was. And Ballard wants a permanent truck route, but we didn't give it to him. We did not give it to him. Okay? And I asked Mr. Allard how many cement trucks are going up Mariner Way on a daily basis. It's 3 trucks only. Okay? And show me an accident where a cement truck caused a great big accident. No, the accidents are single family vehicles and these kind of vehicles. So, you know, I think, Mayor, you need to be very careful who you waltz up and down the street as far as candidates are concerned. Because, you know, with this kind of garbage being spread, you know, people paint you as part of it. And I don't think you want to be part of it. Okay, Mayor? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. Just to point out for factual clarification that Council did pass on the last Council meeting, July 28th, a general temporary truck route exemption at the end of the Council meeting, overriding the city engineer who did not want to agree to a truck route exemption going up Mariner along Como Lake to North Road. And that was in the motion to start 1st of August through to the September 30th as a temporary measure, to come back to Council after a meeting with the truck operators, the gravel operators, on September 30th to have a discussion about our existing truck route bylaw and possible changes to the truck route bylaw. If you want to find out what Council's thoughts and comments were for the press or anybody else, you can go back to the last 4 Council committee meetings where Mr. Allard and the gravel operators came here wanting a truck route changes, permanent truck route changes for their product. The general truck route is just not for Mr. Gravel operators. It is a general truck route exemption for all trucks. When we make a change to our truck route bylaw, if we were to put Como Lake, Mariner, Austin, whatever street it was, when we make that change, that goes to TransLink and becomes a truck route and under TransLink. And we then, if we want to change, we'd have to get TransLink's approval, which we may not ever get again. It can become completely permanent forever. It is true, as Councillor Socorro said, that this is coming back on at the September 30th. Staff will have a report, but we still have to meet with the Truckers Association on this. I didn't support this. I supported the city engineer's position, but this is where we're at right now. There's different comments coming back and forth, but I think the facts are that a general truck route exemption was moved by Council, voted and passed by Council from August 1st to September 30th. The one part I had about it was that none of the people living in those areas were ever notified or informed or anything. There's no press release, no information about it to the public in those areas that this was going on. And this isn't about just Mr. Allard and 3 gravel trucks going up or whatever. This is all trucks. If they were aware of the exemption, all semis already could have used Mariner, Como Lake. So this is what we're at. That's the facts of what happened. This is where Council's at. Council can change its mind and vote not to proceed and stay with our existing truck route bylaw. That may happen on the 30th or middle of October. I don't know when that will come back, probably middle of October, and council will make its final decision. But council did make a decision in request from 4 meetings, I would say very aggressively meetings by Mr. Allard, to satisfy his concerns about getting his product quicker to where he needs to get to. So I would once again invite people to look at the 4 committee meetings that Mr. Allard's at, listen to the comments, and you will see the gist of why this came about and what came about. I think that's the great thing today about our openness, our Wi-Fi, everything's recorded so that people can go look back and double check exactly what people said. So I encourage people to do that, to be informed on this issue moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I will comment a little bit as well. I put myself on as soon as Councillor Sikora started speaking, but Councillor Asmundson had already raised his button by then. So this happened at the last City Council meeting, July 28th, and it was against the City Engineer's recommendation. It was a motion. It was late in the evening. That wasn't the fault of the mover, obviously. It was the schedule of the council meeting. A motion that passed 6-3 to have Mariner, the north side of Mariner, north of Como Lake down to Barnett, and Como Lake from Mariner over to North Road be a truck route on a trial basis, and I note that the flyer actually says on a trial basis, pending a review of the results of that trial. That's, you don't do it on a trial basis if you meant to do it for a short term and then stop no matter what. It was a trial basis. I opposed the motion. It passed 6-3. It was Councillor Asmundson and I think Councillor O'Neill were opposed to it as well. I'm not judging the council members who voted in favor of it, but I have always said that that stretch of Mariner is the most dangerous arterial we have. It is, as an arterial road, it defies description in some ways because I can't imagine why it became an arterial, such a major connection with the design. It's got a grade of up to about 11%, and the south side has a portion that's quite a steep grade, not 11%, but it's perfectly straight at the grade. The only curve on the south portion is actually at a flat portion of the south, and that's the existing truck route that Allard would use to get to his customer. This one's 11% at the tightest corner, the sharpest corner. It's got very sharp curves all the way along it. It's got no center barrier. It's got sidewalks on both sides and houses on both sides. It's got bus stops all along the route. It's got a school right near the top. It's got a park near the top, a crosswalk. It's a button-controlled crosswalk, obviously, because that's for students to get across Mariner. It wasn't designed as a truck route. It's got no margins for error. It's not designed as a truck route. Yet the decision we made, and I opposed it, would allow semis, concrete trucks, dump trucks with trailers, any number of trucks to go up and down, loaded or unloaded, in both directions. It wasn't, our current truck route is actually designed so that the loaded trucks go all the way around on a low-heat highway until they get to the point that's closest to where they're delivering, and then they kind of go up fully loaded, and of course they dump their load at the top and they come back down unloaded. Making it a truck route, making Mariner truck route means that Burnaby concrete trucks can now use Como Lake and go down Mariner with 14 yards of concrete. They can go down Mariner fully loaded, and that's a challenge from my perspective. So I opposed it. Now, I was invited by 3 residents. Actually, we didn't hear anything from the residents of Coquitlam for a month. I was invited by 3 residents, including Ms. Downer, but also 2 residents of Mariner, who wanted to show me that no one knew that this was happening. No one knew that it was now a truck route. And that's what, in fact, the results were. We didn't find anybody that, during the time I was visiting those other residents, that showed it was a truck route. No one knew it was a truck route. Now, door knocking. I remember during the last election, I door knocked with a number of candidates. I even knocked on doors with non-candidates who wanted to show me their issues and talk to their residents in their neighborhood. I've always met with residents. I've knocked on doors on Gatensbury with a resident just last month, a resident of Gatensbury who was concerned about traffic safety for the children on the way to Harborview Elementary. I've door knocked near marijuana grow-ops when the neighbors have raised questions about that. I've knocked on doors in Maillardville, Plateau, Ranch Park, New Horizon, etc. And when I was DPAC president about 7 years ago, we started a traffic safety survey. We've conducted a very significant traffic safety survey, primarily related to school traffic safety. And in fact, many of the policy recommendations that came out of that survey informed our own school walkability program. Actually, at the time, Councillor Asmundson was the chair of, can't remember the name of it, engineering committees. Yes, it was the committee that received the report from DPAC at the time. I was actually the one who presented it because I was a councillor, but also DPAC president. I've been pretty passionate, and everyone on council knows I'm pretty passionate about traffic safety. We lose more people, we have more injuries related to traffic safety in Coquitlam than, well, name another form of accident where we have that kind of issue. And this one's a little personal for me as well, council knows. A number of years ago, my daughter was riding in a car on the way up Mariner, and at the corner of Mariner and Daybreak, oddly enough, someone that has commented on this issue on Facebook lives at the corner of Pilot and Daybreak at the corner of Mariner. And they describe that there's about 2 accidents there a month. They're always serious. 2 accidents a month. This is consistent with what ICBC and the RCMP tell me. That particular corner is an unusual design. It requires that people are turning the corner right before they almost rear end someone who's waiting to turn left. And that's what happened in this instance. The car my daughter was a passenger in, the driver slammed on the brakes, the car slid forward sideways into oncoming traffic, and if the car that was coming down hadn't been a subcompact, if it had been a truck, it would have had a different result than the serious injury my daughter got. It was a head-on collision, and we get head-on collisions at that corner and other corners. We have trucks that have ended up in people's front yards coming down that hill. This is an issue I'm pretty passionate about. I recognize that I didn't get the vote. I think we need to do some more work on this. I'm particularly concerned because we didn't talk to any of the neighbors before we did this. We didn't talk to any of the people along Como Lake or up Mariner. I'm not judging the council members, and I want to work with council on trying to find a better solution for Mr. Allard. Mr. Allard wanted, for example, to deliver concrete to Centennial High School during its construction. I think we can do that with a simple changing of the way in which we calculate distance for that purpose, which would result in empty trucks occasionally going back down Mariner, more often than they do now, but they do now because that's the way the truck routes work. I'm interested in finding a compromise on this one, but I cannot abide a truck route designation, even on a trial basis, because trial means we're trying it out. We shouldn't be trying this out. Our engineers recommended against it, urged us against it, and I urge us as well on that point. Councillor Wilson.
Well, I didn't really want to have to go through all this again, but because this was my motion, because I worked hard to try to come up with a compromise that could work for everybody, I feel like I need to defend it some way, because it's become a completely political issue, and it should never have become a political issue. Because it's become politicized, the feedback that we're getting from the community is totally tainted, and you know, I'm tempted right now to say let's end it today, because we are never going to get objective feedback now that it's been created, it's been made into a political issue. I just want to give some context, because this is very important in terms of understanding why I made this suggestion. Right now, And again, Mayor Stewart neglects to mention a lot of these things, which is why I say it's very misleading what they've been doing. Right now, trucks are mandated to go all the way down Lougheed, turn right onto United Boulevard, turn right onto Mariner Way, the south side of Mariner Way, where there are schools, where there are hidden driveways, where there is a steep grade, where there is a sharp turn. Everything that he has mentioned to describe the north part of Mariner is also present in the south side of Mariner, and that's where we tell people they have to take their trucks today. So, if it's bad for the north side of Mariner, it should be just as bad for the south side of Mariner, yet we're telling trucks they have to go that way today. Or sorry, as of before July 30th. The other thing in terms of context is we have a grid system. And most of this was predicated on Centennial Secondary, like Mayor Stewart says. If Centennial Secondary was being rebuilt 1 block away from where it is today, 1 block to the northeast, we would tell the truck drivers they could go up Mariner to the north side of Mariner, past all those schools, past all those hidden driveways, down Como Lake, because that's what our truck route tells them to do. And I thought, okay, it's a block away. We have huge congestion issues in the Cape Horn interchange. When there's accidents, these cement trucks are full of cement. It compromises their load. They've got to dump it within a certain time frame. We've got all the construction around Coquitlam Center with the Evergreen Line. Let's try something. Let's just try to make a little change here to see if it would make a difference. And all of this was predicated on having consultation with the trucking industry, with residents, to make sure that we had their input. There was no intention of ever making this permanent. This was just an opportunity to try something different to see if it would work. Mayor Stewart talks about being willing to let Hallard Contracting and Coquitlam Contracting, or Coquitlam Concrete, go up and down Mariner for the Centennial project. Well, you can't have it both ways, right? You're saying you're okay with cement trucks going up and down for the Centennial project, but you're not okay with us doing this as a trial period. That's exactly what you said.
But they'd go down empty, not full.
And that was the one thing that I admit that maybe I misunderstood. I thought we were not allowing it to go down loaded based on the changes that we made. We're trying to spread this around, right? Is it fair that people on the south side of Mariner have trucks going up and down all the time? Is it fair to those schools? Is it fair to those residents? Right? Is it fair to the concrete companies to have their loads compromised if there's an accident and they can't get through there? Like, I'm just trying to spread it out, right? Nobody wants trucks in their yards. Nobody wants trucks on their streets. But we have to try to do something to deal with this unusual circumstance of all the construction that's going on in Coquitlam today. And that's all we were trying to do, was to try to spread it around so it wasn't just all in one area. I did suggest that we just do it for the Centennial project, but I was told by our city that we could not make an exception for one company. So I backed away from making an exception just for the Centennial project, and that's when I said, okay, well, maybe we do a trial period, see how it goes, and then make a decision afterwards, right? And Mayor Stewart, I'm deeply, deeply sorry about your daughter's accident. And the first I'd heard about it was today in our council and committee meeting when we were discussing this at first. And I truly wish that you had told us about that when we were having this discussion. Right? If this was so important to you, I wish you had told me then. Because that might have, to some extent, given a bit more context, right? But I didn't know about it. And unfortunately, those accidents can happen everywhere, right? And yes, she's very lucky it wasn't a truck. She could have been on Austin and been hit by a truck as well. Right? So I'm deeply sorry. I don't want to be insensitive, but for this to have been politicized to the extent it is now, by you I feel is irresponsible. I'm not going to read the Facebook post that you put up today, but people can go and have a look at it. It's completely accurate, but it's completely one-sided and misleading at the same time. And there is never any intention that this would be a permanent truck route. But to insinuate that is a possibility is using scare tactics, and for the leader of our city, leading up to an election, to be doing this at this time of the year, I just think is irresponsible. So just wanted to give a little context. In 6 weeks, we had 2 people complain about this truck route. 2 people in 6 weeks. Now, some people say, well, they didn't know about it. Well, if they didn't know about it, then it wasn't an issue. They weren't bothered by the traffic. They weren't bothered by the noise. And for sure there can be some safety issues, but there's safety issues on every road that we have. And we're telling them they got to go down the south side of Mariner as it is, which ends at a dead end at a light, which is almost just as steep, which has hidden driveways, which has school crossings by it. So I don't think it's that unreasonable to have suggested, let's just try something different. So that's the context. It shouldn't be politicized. The feedback that we're going to get from our community is going to be tainted because of this. It was never intended to be a permanent change. Nobody, I think, on council would ever consider doing that until we had complete faith that it was the right decision to make, and that would only come after a lot of consultation, and that's what this was predicated on. Right? Consultation with the industry, consultation with the residents, and I'm very disappointed that that's not going to happen as early as we thought it was going to happen, but it is going to happen, and we'll be able to make a thorough decision after that. Thank you.
Thank you. A motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We'll have a question period for items on tonight's agenda. Is there anything that's in the agenda package? If you have an issue or a question or anything, anybody, thank you all for coming. Have a good evening.